great newcomer, and I had lunch with a guy 2 days ago who's going to run for office in Michigan, and he's got a PhD in religious ethics from Yale and a law degree from Yale, and I'm thinking, God, there's a God in heaven that some young guy with a PhD from Yale in religious ethics and law wants to run for state senate in Michigan. He came home like Shannon. He had to come home. But our next speaker is that kind of incredible story that even with everything bad that gets said about everybody in politics, it still attracts good people to the American dream of political activism and change. So when I read Shaunteel Jenkins' bio, and I've been in Lansing for too long now because I've lost touch with my homeland here in Detroit, I thought, she sounds like Marianne Mahaffey. and then I read to the bottom and it said Marianne Mahaffey, one of the greatest achievements in her career was being on Marianne Mahaffey's staff and being her chief of staff. She works for Mariners Inn. She's got her own company called Petite Sweets, which is one great thing about young people in this day and age is they're so entrepreneurial, which is really cool. But she came out of nowhere to finish 5th out of 165 people in the primary in Detroit. And if that wasn't enough, in the general, she went from 5th to 3rd, and she finished 3rd. The stories like the story about my wife are always the meeting of really great, outstanding leaders with an openness and receptivity that's somehow there on the part of people to somebody great. So I'm so excited to be sitting next to you. It gives me like really great hope. And I want to ask, how do you think with the huge challenges in front of us in the city of Detroit and the region generally, how do you think your gender and your age too will play into this? And how do we encourage more young people to get into the pipeline? So what do you bring to us, and how do we get more of you?
First of all, thank you, and I'm honored to be here and to be a part of the White House Project. Detroit is sort of a unique place, and we have a very unique leadership perspective in the city of Detroit. As most of you know, in the city of Detroit, our last city council, or current city council, actually has 7 women and 2 men. The newly elected council will only have 3 women and 6 men. But when I started, and Detroit has gone through lots of turmoil in the past 3, 4, 5 years, depending on how you count. And one of the things that when I first started this campaign, I heard so many times was, you'll never get elected. I'm never voting for another woman. The reason this city is so messed up, it's all those women on council. And I kept saying, how many times in the history of this country, when you look across our entire country, how many messed up legislative bodies have been full of men? And how often have you heard men say, or anybody say, it's all those men on Congress. That's it, it's just too many men. So the thing that I found myself constantly saying during the campaign is it's not gender, it's character and it's qualifications. And there are lots and lots of good, qualified women out there who have a high level of integrity. So we have to encourage them, which is what the White House Project did and does, encourages good women to get involved in the process. And I think that's how we get more women involved in the process, mentor people, like Marianne Mahaffey mentored me. And I was just telling Geena, when I worked for Marianne, she used to say, Shaunteel, we're going to prepare you. Those of you who know Marianne, she talked like this, and she said, we're going to prepare you and you'll be great one day. And I say, never. Crazy people run for office. I have gone crazy. But the important thing is she lit a fire in me. And I started as an intern in Marianne Mahaffey's office. I was even mad about being assigned to her office because as a social worker, I was saying I should be working with some foster kids and, with women who've been abused in the underserved communities. And Marianne said, politicians do serve the underserved communities. What we do as politicians is we create policy, good or bad, that affects what social workers do. And what she said is we put Band-Aids, social workers put Band-Aids on wounds that are caused by poor public policy. She lit a fire that has never been extinguished. Of course that fire, you know, gasoline was doused on it when I looked at our current legislative body and some of the things that were going on. But now we're in a place where we've gone from a majority women on city council to the minority. And I was the only woman, new woman, elected to Detroit City Council. And I'm proud to be the only new woman, but also I understand the importance of having women, good women at the table who can make decisions that are in the best interest of this entire city. As far as age, as you know, Detroit and Michigan is also unique in that we're one of the most segregated areas in this country. And now we have 4 new people on Detroit City Council who were not born when the race riots happened in 1967. So it'll bring a different perspective because you'll have people whose perspectives and policies are not defined pre and post race riots. And I think that that's an important factor when you talk about age. And we bring more of both in by mentoring, by setting the example, and by saying openly that this is an important thing for us to do. And acting on it, not just talking about it. We act on it like Marianne did often. I started as an intern. I'll have many interns and, you know, continue to bring dynamic women into the fold. Thank you.
One thing that I would really love to encourage you all to do is there is a website for this report, and I can't tell you how hard it was to collect this data. It's not a conspiracy, but collecting the data was awful. And part of what we're dealing with, of course, is race and gender. And connecting data on race is almost impossible. And that's very hard because in the law, when I mentioned there are only 80% partners in the law firms who are women, the lowest number of anything are the number of women of color on law firm partners. And so having that out there is important. So I'd just like to make one final plea for when you go on our website, if you have more data, we need to be gathering more data. Because that was
Okay, it's late, but we're going to run through really quick and hear one comment from each of our panelists about what's the one thing that we ought to be focused on to change things here in Michigan based on what's in the benchmark report. And that could include Beth Gotthelf's new committee on representation. But here's the order. We're going to go this way. We're going to go Mary, you first.
Okay, I take what Terry Barkley and Inforum have been doing with the Michigan Women's Index and trying to get more CEOs and chairs of nominating committees and Mary Sue Coleman, the women who are in leadership positions, but also the men who are in companies that have done well in terms of women at either officers or trustees on the corporate boards, and try to get a little momentum and build a strategic plan to create change in the state of Michigan, and then roll that out nationally and get some states to compete against one another on that.
Oh, nice.
Mary Muley?
Yeah, well, I would echo everything that Mary said because I was thinking about the data, and right now it's segmented by industry, but looking at it by state would really give us a bird's eye view of what's really going on here, and then you could also matrix it by industry as well. So really understanding the numbers around Michigan specifically, and then having a target is one of the recommendations. The other is a point that Marie referenced earlier, and it has to do with women of color. We've got to make that part of, and I'm so grateful to this panel, but less of an afterthought, more of a proactive engagement, invitation to Latina women, Arab American women, Chaldean women. You know, there's a broad spectrum here in Michigan, and that part of who we are as women has to be included because there are points where we diverge, and there are points where we're together. So we need to understand and have a coalition, I think, from a diversity point of view as well. And I think really ensure that all CEOs come to an event like this so that they can understand the power of women and the opportunity that's really being missed by not galvanizing the efforts behind this in a more consistent, proactive way.
Great. We have built that network better together. The Michigan Women's Foundation, Carolyn Casson should have been here tonight, and many of you have been invited to be part of the Power of 100, where she's trying to get 100 women as a core group. But there's a real look toward angel investing, that about 4% of the angel capital goes to women's firms, while 60% of the new businesses are being created by women. There's a huge mismatch, and that fund, somebody was talking, might have been you, Marie, she's really looking at creating a fund like that in Michigan. So, so we got to get the right and left hand talking together. Shaunteel, Jenkins, what would you tell us about what Michigan needs to do to move forward?
Well, I think we should start, I think Michigan has some dynamic women who are in leadership positions. One just walked in, Miss Cindy Paskey. One of the things that helped me a lot was having a Cindy Paskey who introduced me to credible men in Michigan and in the city of Detroit who helped launch my campaign. There's nobody coming out of nowhere. So it's important to have strong voices at the table who can advocate appropriately to bring more women into the fold.